The Disney Channel original animated series The Proud Family is in the news recently, as a revival of the early 2000s show is set to debut on Disney Plus later this month. With its announcement has also come a good deal of hype. For example, its list of guest stars is a who's who of Black entertainers currently working in media industries today. The new series has also gained some attention for its more expansive take on Black representation, including a new gay couple played by Billy Porter and Zachary Quinto. All this hype and discussion of what makes for good Black representation in media also makes it a prescient time to take a candid look at the original animated series and its forms of representation. This video examines the pervasive colorism in The Proud Family. There are a number of Black women and men who have talked about the limitations of The Proud Family on YouTube, and I recommend you check out some of their videos as well for their perspectives. I'll link some of the videos below for further watching. What I want to add to the conversation in this video is how the animation of the show also works to perpetuate colorism. With this knowledge, we can evaluate Louder and Prouder and see if the series creatives have changed their approach to depicting Blackness on screen. Before diving in, I want to acknowledge my positionality to this material. I'm a white settler scholar based in Jojage. This series aired on the Disney Channel when I was growing up, so I have some history with the show, but it did not serve as a foundational text the way it did with others. In discussions of the show on YouTube, I find that there are a lot of mixed feelings around the series. On videos critiquing The Proud Family for its colorism, there are a lot of comments caught in this tension, recognizing that the series was foundational to their youth, but also recognizing how it's problematic as well. My intention here with this video is to help share analysis of racial representation in film and media more broadly, while also adding my own research on animation to the discussion. Much of this discussion on YouTube and elsewhere has been narrative-based. This video will add a material analysis to the discussion as well, one attentive to the series as an animated work. For this analysis, I will be building on the work of Catherine Knight Steele, an assistant professor of communications at University of Maryland, College Park. Her article, Pride and Prejudice, Pervasiveness of Colorism and the Animated Series Proud Family, tackles the under-researched topic of colorism in media, particularly children's media. This video will first talk about what colorism is, then examine colorism in The Proud Family by analyzing the show's characters. It looks at how both the writing and animation of the show work in tandem to reinforce colorist ideas of beauty and wealth. The video will end with some closing thoughts on how the show can help us rethink our contemporary discussions of representation. As an animated series, The Proud Family has a lot of flexibility in what it can depict through the medium of animation. As Steele puts it, in an animated series, producers and animators do not face the material limitations that are often used to justify patterns of exclusion of darker-skinned individuals in Hollywood and on television. Animation largely provides the possibility to construct our desired reality. Animation artists have near, if not complete, control in the way they approach their work, from designing characters to framing them on screen. So what kind of approaches did the Proud Family creatives choose? To begin, we need to define some terms, namely, what is colorism? Margaret L. Hunter provides a useful definition of colorism in her book Race, Gender, and the Politics of Skin Tone. White racism is the fundamental building block of colorism, or skin color stratification, among many Mexican Americans and African Americans. The maintenance of white supremacy in America is predicated on the notion that dark skin represents savagery, irrationality, ugliness, and inferiority. White skin, and thus whiteness itself, is defined by the opposite: civility, rationality, beauty, and superiority. These meanings are infused into actual body types to create the system of racism as we know it today. Skin color and features associated with whites such as light skin, straight noses, and long straight hair take on the meanings that they represent: civility, rationality, and beauty. Similarly, skin colors and features associated with Africans or Indians, such as dark skin, broad noses, and kinky hair, represent savagery, irrationality, and ugliness. The values associated with physical features set the stage for skin color stratification. As Steele notes, colorism is a worldwide phenomenon of discrimination, wherein people are given certain status and privilege based on their physical features of skin color, facial features, and hair textures. Within the African American community, this is a topic with a long and painful history, and with lasting implications. For more on this topic, I recommend Khadija Bo's video on colorism. And this is where media comes into play. Media is powerful in its ability to either disrupt or reinforce these systems of power. Mass media such as television is especially important here in its ability to reach millions of people over time. Children's television especially so. This is the context from which Steele approaches The Proud Family. Created by Bruce W. Smith, the series aired from 2001 to 2005 on the popular American television cable network, the Disney Channel. In her analysis, Steele identifies pervasive colorism in the series, in both the design and narrative framing of its characters, finding colorism in the show's ideas of beauty and socioeconomic status.
The Proud Family. What?
When you look at all the characters of the Proud Family, how they are designed, and how they are narratively framed, it's clear there's a division based around skin color, hair texture, and facial features. Characters with lighter skin, straightened hair, and more Eurocentric facial features are framed by the narrative and the camera as more desirable, while characters with darker skin, natural hair, and more Afrocentric facial features are framed as not desirable, or even monstrous. Examining the characters in detail, both their narrative attributes and character design, illustrates how the series perpetuates colorist beauty standards. We can start with Penny, the main character of the series, as well as Trudy, her mother. As Steele notes, these characters are some of the most multidimensional in the whole show, and we are meant to empathize with them. Notably, they are also characters with many Eurocentric features. Both women have straightened hair as opposed to natural hair. They are also lighter skinned. By contrast, Penny's best friend Dejanay is darker skinned with more Afrocentric features and is framed as comedic relief. She is the most overtly sexualized, with her midriff exposed. As Steele describes, Dejanay is short with a thicker build. She has large lips and dark skin. Her hair is blonde. This subtly illustrates Dejanay's attempt to enact the white standard of beauty, though she is unsuccessful in her efforts. A running joke of the show is Dejanay's undesirability. She constantly flirts with Sticky, another friend, only to be turned down every time.
Ooh, Sticky, you look so fly.
Good suggestion, Dejanay.
Sticky, I didn't mean fly, what?
Dejanay is routinely the butt of the joke that she is unsuccessful in love. Steele also points out that Dejanay's personality is also stereotypical for darker-skinned women. She writes that Dejanay is depicted as loud, mean, and aggressive. Some may argue this is the reason for her lack of success with romantic partners. Yet we must explore why the character with more Afrocentric phenotypic traits is also the character we interpret as aggressive and loud. Ultimately, the representation of this character devalues Black women on the basis of skin color, relegating darker-skinned women to supporting roles and reifying stereotypes about the deviance of Black women from traditional notions of femininity. Between these two main characters, Penny and Dejanay, we can see how colorist beauty standards manifests in the character design and narrative framing in the Proud Family. We can see this colorist beauty standards through side characters as well. One character where we see this at play is Deborah Williams, a guest character voiced by real actor Vanessa Williams. Appearing in the Season 2 episode Ain't Nothing Like the Real Thingy, Deborah has lighter skin, long, straighter hair, a thin nose, thin lips, a thin body, and has large breasts. The show frames these Eurocentric features as more desirable, as the plot of the episode revolves around Penny thinking Deborah is trying to seduce her father. Through the narrative, we are told this character, who has lighter skin and more Eurocentric features, is attractive. Through the animation and sound design, this message comes across as well, especially through camera movement when Deborah is first introduced.
Deborah? Deborah Williams?
Now, we the audience know from our consumption of Hollywood cinema that this vertical pan up a woman's body codes this woman as desirable. When we see the camera pan up Deborah's body, we are told through this animated camera movement that she is attractive. And that sound effect! I can't get over how hard the aesthetics of the series are working to convince you that this woman is attractive. Literally to a cartoonish degree. By contrast, there are the Gross sisters, Nubia, Olay, and Gina, a trio who are the bullies of the series.
Hands up, cash out.
To me, the Gross sisters are the most striking example of colorism in the show. It's worth quoting Steele at length here to describe the characters and how their character designs perpetuates colorist beauty standards. Their skin is illustrated with a deep shade of blue, referencing the colorist pejorative phrase blue-black, used to describe the darkness of skin. Their thick hair is usually kept in braids, and their body types are either much larger or much smaller than the typical European ideal. The illustrators use dark skin color as an indicator of fear and ugliness. Their last name assigned to the sisters, Gross, explains to the audience that they cannot and should not be considered physically appealing. I'll add to Steele's analysis here and point out that the Gross sisters also have prominent overbites in their character design. Only one of the sisters, Nubia, actually speaks. The others are always silent. As a marker of the monstrousness, Olay, the heaviest of the trio, is occasionally accompanied with animal growling. These animal noises frame her as other, as uncivilized and savage. This series is upfront on what you are supposed to think of these young, dark-skinned girls.
You better check your girls. The Gross sisters are straight tripping.
What are you talking about, Sticky?
The Gross sisters. The three big ashy girls.
This is from the first episode of the show. Speaking to Vogue, Dr. Yaba Blay explains the cultural context of this phrase. Speaking as a black woman, I know that in the history of white supremacy, there is an investment in a particular kind of presentation and performance of our value. Ash reflects that you don't care about your appearance, and or you may not be able to care about your appearance. Sticky's use of the phrase here indicates undesirability, a perceived lack of attention to appearance, and perhaps also points to the Gross sisters' lower socioeconomic status. One thing that strikes me in how these characters are designed is that they are literally characters with blue skin, a non-human skin color. This visually marks them as other, as no one else in the show has unrealistic skin tones. It's just them. It's worth pointing out that The Proud Family is a series that is relatively down to earth.
Hi, Penny.
Roker, where did you come from?
My Doppler radar told me you were in the midst of a storm.
Relatively. The series takes place in the real world. Penny doesn't have magic fairies or superpowers. She's just a young girl who goes to middle school and whose problems mostly stem from her overbearing father, obsessed with protecting her from her own adolescence. The Gross sisters are blue, which seems to imply that the racist, colorist idea of blue-black skin is also real, merely a fact of life, not one of fiction. The Season 1 episode, Makeover, serves as a capstone for the Proud Family's colorist beauty standards. Penny and her friends give Olay a makeover. Her hair is straightened, her braces seemingly removed, and her body is shaped more like an hourglass shape, just like Deborah Williams.
She looks great!
Looking at these characters, we see how the Proud Family produces colorist ideas on what makes something and someone beautiful. Looking at these characters, we see how the Proud Family produces colorist ideas on what makes someone beautiful. Characters with lighter skin tones and more Eurocentric facial features, in other words, characters with traits closer to whiteness, are discursively framed as more desirable, while those with darker skin tones and more Afrocentric facial features are not. This discursive framing is not just narrative, but aesthetic as well, through the animation's character design and camera movement.
The Proud Family. What?
While colorism manifests in beauty standards in the show, it also manifests through wealth as well. Characters with lighter skin and more Eurocentric features are more successful in their businesses or just more wealthy in general. This dynamic is particularly present between Penny's parents, Trudy and Oscar. Trudy has a stable career as a veterinarian.
I pay for everything.
Not everything.
She also has a lighter skin tone than Oscar, and is typically framed in the show as the more civil and rational one.
Okay, either you give her a raise or...
Did I say 5? I meant to say 6.
Oscar, by contrast, is a struggling pork rinds manufacturer who is comically terrible in his career. Namely, that his pork rinds make everyone sick. Oscar is framed as more irrational and overly emotional. His calling card in the series, in fact, is yelling for his wife.
Trudy! Trudy! Trudy!
Oscar is so prone to outbursts that a supercut of his yelling is 37 minutes long. He is constantly mocked by others around him, including his own mother. As Steele points out, while he owns a business, which presumably means he has some business smarts, he is usually framed as less intelligent, and in one episode from Season 2, Behind Enemy Lines, he is constantly mocked for his lack of wealth.
You have to work on our marriage like you work on your job.
You don't expect much, do you, Trudy?
This link between darker skin tone and lower socioeconomic status is also seen with Dejanay. As Steele points out, Dejanay is both darkest and has the lowest socioeconomic status. This is demonstrated by constant references to her apartment, which is too small to hold her many brothers and sisters, and her inability to afford many of the luxuries in Penny's home. As a final example of colorism's socioeconomic dimensions, we can look at La Cienega Boulevardes and her family. So, La Cienega's the worst.
Don't you want to stay and support us?
Why should I? We're not even friends.
She is self-absorbed and constantly manipulates people around her. She also constantly bullies Penny whenever she can get away with it.
Dinner was delicious, Mrs. Proud, and your house is beautiful.
The next day.
Save it, cornball. I'm already cool by myself, and your house stinks.
The creators of the show label her as a frenemy.
La Cienega, forever the frenemy to Penny Proud.
But really, she's just a bully. As Steele points out, La Cienega has the lightest skin, the thinnest nose, and the longest, straightest hair of all of Penny's friends. She and her family are also some of the richest characters.
I can't do anything with the 50 my parents give me.
50 cents? I guess I shouldn't feel so bad.
That's $50. Penny pincher.
And La Cienega uses her class status as a means to dismiss Penny throughout the show. La Cienega has access to a significant amount of wealth that Penny and her friends just don't. Also, her mom's a cop.
So after I pulled him over, I told Felix he had a choice of walking the line or walking down the aisle.
And he went for that?
I'm a cop and I'm strapped.
In sum, the Proud family lines this divide between lighter and darker skin tones with wealth, illustrating that the series relies on colorist notions of not only beauty, but socioeconomic status as well. Watching episodes of the show, there's just so much I found that I wanted to talk about. It has this weird take on the Matrix which completely subverts the revolutionary politics of the film in this heavy-handed screed against piracy. It's also striking to me just how often the show is cruel to Penny, to a point where it's honestly unsettling. But I'll just take time to point to one scene from Season 1, the episode Strike, because it's quite revealing of the show's politics.
Sticky, what are you doing?
Trying to raise me some paper so I can see the movies. Y'all want to help a brother out?
We don't have any money to give away.
I work for it. Do your taxes.
Sticky, we're Republicans. We don't pay taxes.
What's striking about this episode, no pun intended, are really two things. First, it misses the obvious joke to make here, which is for Penny to say, I don't need to do my taxes. I don't have a job. After all, she's 14 and in middle school. And second, and more importantly, this is not a joke. It's a statement of fact. It serves as an important index to the actual politics that guide the series as a whole.
Now, what have we learned from all this, Penny?
That an allowance is not a right, but a privilege.
That's my girl.
And next time, let mommy do the negotiating. Bye, y'all.
The Proud Family. What?
With contemporary movements in Hollywood such as #OscarsSoWhite, we've seen a recent focused effort to increase opportunities for people of color on and off screen. This important work is often summarized with the phrase and #representation matters. This phrase, however, often flattens this discussion of representation on screen to merely a number. In her article for Film Quarterly, film professor Kristen J. Warner outlines what she calls plastic representation. Plastic representation can be understood as a combination of synthetic elements put together and shaped to look like meaningful imagery, but which can only approximate depth and substance because ultimately it is hollow and cannot survive close scrutiny. Warner notes she uses the phrase plastic here as it refers to both shallowness and malleability. Plastic representation frequently occurs when the conversation around diversity begins and ends in the casting stage. In an interview with the Chicago Tribune, Warner notes that when discussions of representation only happen at the casting level, that's a form of plastic representation. The Proud Family and Disney's promotion around the series for Disney Plus serves as a great example of Warner's concept of plastic representation. In the online series Disney Plus Deets, hosts Kenneth Brown and Marcellus Kidd fondly remember the Proud Family for its representation.
This series is all about representation, with a capital R.
While these hosts mention one-off episodes the show did, such as an episode on Kwanzaa, the focus of such representation seems to be quantitative, just the sheer number of Black and other people of color characters on screen. But as I've demonstrated throughout this video, the issue with this series is qualitative, the actual form and function the representation takes. And this issue of qualitative representation extends to the latest continuation of the series. In regard to the announcement of a same-sex couple for Louder and Prouder, Black critics have questioned why a Black gay man needs to be paired with whiteness. As Tori Deuce puts it, not every Black queer person has to be paired up with the House of Colonization. Dr. Alfred Martin, who studies gay Black representation on television, points out that this couple is informed by what audiences, the creators, think will be watching the show. Steele surmises that The Proud Family is a children's show that celebrates the African American family and offers diverse views of the Black community. Yet it still relies heavily on colorist notions when dealing with both beauty and socioeconomic status. While Disney Plus's promotional content frames the show as a win for representation, I don't think that's fully the case. As Catherine Knight Steele writes, and as I hope I've demonstrated here, the original Proud Family is a clear example of colorism in television, and is a particularly useful example for thinking about how animation as a medium can reproduce colorism as well. Since the Proud Family originally aired, there's been a bevy of animation that illustrates the medium's ability to capture nuanced and beautiful Black representation in film and television. There is even animation that illustrates you can use non-realistic colors for humans without falling into the trap of colorism. All these examples show that the Proud Family didn't have to look this way. Just in terms of visual appeal, the animation in The Proud Family, Louder and Prouder seems much improved than the original. The original series was produced by a lot of people who were new to animation.
Almost everyone involved in producing the series was working in animation for the very first time.
And yeah, it shows. Aesthetically, The Proud Family has aged rather poorly, colorism and otherwise. Louder and Prouder is certainly a much-needed revamp, with saturated hues, detailed textures, and expansive lighting. I think the big question is if a visual upgrade is enough to avoid repeating its past history of colorism. As of this writing, only a few trailers have dropped for the new show.
A boy that does makeup! What is your generation coming to, Penny?
For me, a strong index of whether the series has grappled with its past history of colorism is whether the Gross sisters are still included, and if they are, do they still look the same? After all, their visual treatment throughout the original series was rather shocking, and how these young girls with darker skin tones were persistently othered in the series. If they are included with the same character design, I think it would throw into question Louder and Prouder's claim towards bringing good Black representation. Well, I guess we'll see. Thanks for watching this video. There's so much to say about the Proud family, so I tried to just keep my discussion to colorism for today. One idea I want to examine in the future is children's television that examines labor strikes, such as The Proud Family and Hey Arnold. Leave a comment in the chat if that's something you'd be interested in, and let me know about your thoughts on the Proud Family overall. Until next time.